Hey class, today we start describing the cardiovascular system, which consists of three things. We have the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. So the heart is the pump that squeezes the blood, the fluid part, into a series of pipes or tubes, which are your blood vessels, arteries, veins, capillaries. Today, we're going to start describing the blood as a tissue. So, the blood is a transport mechanism that your body uses to carry out whatever you can imagine, from little ions of sodium, potassium, hormones. It can carry proteins, it can carry the medicine, the antibiotic that you take. It carries nutrients, glucose and amino acids and fats dissolved in there. It carries also waste products. We produce a ton of waste during daily in our metabolism. Those waste products, urea, one of those, they're carried to, in this case, to the kidneys to be excreted in the form of urine. One of the main functions, though, is to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide, so to carry dissolved gases. So these gases are picked up in the lungs. The oxygen is picked up in at the lungs, and the carbon dioxide is a waste product is given up in there, and this oxygen is carried to all the peripheral tissues to be delivered and oxygenate all our tissues. So that's the main function. Now, what happens when, let's draw a sample of blood. You draw the sample of blood, and then you can centrifuge those samples or those little tubes containing whole blood. Just the entire blood that you're getting in there. You have done nothing but collecting the blood. Now, what you end up is with the tube looking like this. So you have separated the components of the whole blood. And the whole blood consists in, we have a ground substance, which is a ground substance that is your plasma. This liquid part in here. This is your plasma, and it has cells, or at least parts of some cells, which is this solid part. So when you centrifuge that sample of whole blood, whatever is heavier goes and sets on the bottom of the tube, the cells, and whatever is lighter, the liquid, the plasma, floats on top of the cells. So what does this remind you? Ground substance plus cells. What kind of tissue has those two components? Connective tissue. Blood is a type of connective tissue. It's a specialized type, actually, of connective tissue. The only fluid tissue or connective tissue in the body. Now let's describe these components of the there we have it, of the whole blood. So we have three main components. Actually, let's start with the two. First of all, we have, remember we said on the top is going to float plasma. So this is number one, plasma. And number two, we have formed elements, which includes the red thing in here and this grayish striped. So that is number two, formed elements. And they're called formed elements and not cells because actually most of them are not even cells. Red blood cells are not true cells. Platelets are not cells at all. They're pieces of a cell. Okay, so let's describe where we're going to start with erythrocytes, I guess. Yes. Now, if you say, and we can agree on this, we can say that all of this is your volume of blood, right? And all of that is your, that's a zero, is your 100%. So we can say that maybe half, the 50% is about here. So see that only about 45% consists of the fourth element, and the remaining, 55% consists of plasma. Okay, so this percentage, this fraction of the whole blood containing only red blood cells, the red part, is called hematocrit. Okay, so hematocrit is measured in percentage, and it's telling you the percentage of red blood cells that is occupying the entire volume of blood. Okay, and in this tube is only the red part. Don't get confused this with the total amount of red blood cells. Okay, that we measure that in units. For example, in 1 millimeter of blood, we have at least 3-4 millions of red blood cells. What we're talking in here is the concentration. Yes, the concentration of red blood cells in the entire blood. Okay, in the whole blood. Now, this is around 45%. But then you see that forming part of the formed element, we have the buffy coat. Okay, or not the erythrocytes, is that stripe that you can see in there, and that accounts for less than 1% of the formed element, and actually not of the formed element, of the entire whole blood. And that consists of the other two types of cells that we have in blood, which are the white blood cells. The other name for white blood cells are leukocytes, and platelets. And the other name for platelets are thrombocytes. I'll show you later the name. And the other name for erythrocytes, by the way, are the red blood cells. Now let's describe and let's talk a little bit about plasma. So as you can see, is account for 55% of the whole blood. And most of that, when you examine plasma, most of that is water. 90, I think. Yeah, 90% of that is water. And we have floating in there some solutes. So we have ions, sodium, potassium, chloride. We have gases, especially carbon dioxide. We have nutrients like glucose, amino acids, triglycerides, bound to a protein. We have a bunch of proteins, and actually that's what makes the bulk of the solute part of plasma, which is about 10%. So proteins, the main protein that that is present in plasma is the albumin. And albumin is a protein. Imagine that this is a blood vessel, and in here is albumin. Albumin, what it does is to keep plasma, liquid part, inside the blood vessel. It avoids the leakage of the liquid part or fluid part out of the blood vessel, which will cause edema, right? So albumin is a great measure of, and we use it a lot. When you have your lab work done, usually we measure albumin, and that gives us an idea of your nutritional status, the amount of proteins in your body. Malnourished kids, well, people, because it can be not kids, have lower amount, or the amount of albumin is decreased, which means that the albumin usually where albumin is present, it can drag water into it. It attracts water. That is called oncotic pressure. So if we have now less water, we're dragging less water into the blood vessel, and we're letting actually part of this plasma, part of this fluid to leak out of the blood vessel. And that's why you see most of these malnourished patients very skinny but yet swollen. Another protein, important proteins are the globulins. They form, most of them are forming antibodies which are, related to the immune system. Those are the specific immunity that defends our body from specific antigens or pathogens. And fibrinogen is like a precursor, or it will become during coagulation, or when the clot is forming, when we are stopping uh, any type of bleeding. Fibrinogen turns or becomes fibrin. Put it in Spanish. Fibrin, which are threads of fibers that help to form the clot to put a patch in any and avoid bleeding. Okay, so look at the relation of hematocrit and plasma, or red blood cells and plasma, the percentage of red blood cells in plasma, how it can change. This is the normal. Okay, let me get blue. So this is normal, right? We said that about 55, right, of plasma and 45 of erythrocytes. So this is your hematocrit. If for any reason you have an increased amount of plasma or a decreased amount of erythrocytes, or decreased amount of hematocrit, let's say 35, and this will be 65, that's what we call anemia. So anemia can be because we have a reduced amount of red blood cells, so we are not, producing enough red blood cell for any reason. We'll discuss that in class. But also can be because we have an increased amount of plasma. Now the plasma will be up here, or something about. So it's like the red blood cells are normal in number, but the hematocrit, or they are like diluted in there. So one is not a true anemia. This one is a true anemia. We have a small amount of hematocrit. Okay, and of course, if you have anemia, your ability to deliver, to carry oxygen to other peripheral tissues is decreased. And then you have all the symptoms. You're lazy, you're tired, want to sleep, you're pale, all the symptoms of anemia. Your heart is pounding like crazy, trying to keep up, now let me send more blood in order to make up for the reduced amount of red blood cells. And look at the opposite. We have polycythemia. Polycythemia, we have an increased amount of red blood cells. The hematocrit here is higher than 45, but the amount of plasma is reduced now. Okay, so let's say that in here we have like 55 and 45. Okay, pay attention and see that always in these cases, in these examples, the volume of blood is always the same. What we're changing is the proportion. So in here, the blood is more concentrated. We have a little bit of plasma, a lot of red blood cells. This can happen as a disease, polycythemia vera, but it can happen just like an adjustment mechanism where, especially with people living in the Himalayas, in high altitude places, the higher you go in altitude, the lesser the concentration of oxygen is in atmosphere. So in order to adjust to those changes, the red blood cell production increases, so to deliver, to keep up with the oxygen distribution throughout the body. Okay, What else? What we're gonna do with this drop of blood? Okay, let's put only one drop of blood. Let's put it right here in this glass slide, and with another glass slide, we're gonna slide it over, and we have a smear. That's a smear. So we're gonna let it dry. We're gonna fix it with some alcohol, and we're gonna put some dyes in there, some stains. And after that, you're going to place that under the microscope, and you're gonna see this. Amazing. So this is true. This is how it actually looks like. So I've told you, or maybe not, that erythrocytes outnumber big time the rest of the cells. Erythrocytes or red blood cells, I'm going to talk about 1 millimeter, cubic milliliter of blood. In there, we have at least 3, I'm going to say 3 millions, 3 to 4 millions, depending on the sex, of erythrocytes, but only 10,000 white blood cells and 500,000 of platelets. Okay, so what do you see in here? What do you see is that I have more of these discs in here that look so funny. Okay, those are your red blood cells. Then we have the second type of cells are the white blood cells. They look familiar, right? They look like or look alike a little bit to the cells that we described in the first chapters of this course. And then do you see this? Those little things in there? Those are platelets. And those are not even cells, or pieces, fragments of a bigger cell that we'll see later. So see, it is true. In here, we have the red blood cells are the most numerous type of blood cell in here. Then we have a group of white blood cells involved in immunity, and then the fragments of platelets involved in clotting. So in the next videos, what we're going to do is describe the functions of each of these group of cells. Okay? So see you later, alligator.